All right, Ray Dalio got in this whole idea. The one big worry for him right now, and this is something that happens in these cycles, is world tensions developing between premier world powers. Again, he cited the friction between ourselves and China. Not so much Russia, by the way, which I found kind of interesting, the Ukrainian war notwithstanding. Harry Kazianis joins us right now, the Rogue States Project president. Harry was among those early on the China threat. And one of the things, Harry, and it's good to have you, that you hear from Mr. Dalio is this idea that, if we're not careful, we could stumble into a war. The tensions are rising to the degree they are, that any slip up could make this much worse. What do you think?
Well, I disagree with him a little bit in terms of the over-under that you asked him in terms of percentages if we're going to have a war with China. I actually think it's more than likely that we will have a war with China. Really? I say that, Neal, because you have to look at history. I mean, history is filled with all of these different situations where you have a rising power like a China that meets, I hate to say it, a relatively declining power like the United States. And I say that just because if you compare our, power advantages after World War II, I mean, compared to that, we have declined a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the challenge here is that the Chinese understand in the long term that the United States does not want them to dominate the Asia-Pacific region, and that creates tensions. I mean, for example, the Chinese have declared the South China Sea their own sovereign territory, claiming a body of water deal. So that's a big deal, and that's why I think there is a real possibility of a war.
It doesn't take much, and you're a great student of history, for something, that seems like an aberrant event to trigger something much worse. I mentioned about World War I and the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife. Who would have figured that would have led to complex, relationships that brought it to a war, the First World War. It's hard to envision whether a trip by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, for example, would trigger something like that. But what do you think?
Actually, I could see a very real scenario. I mean, let's say, for example, the Chinese decide that they want to flex their military muscles and they start doing missile tests. Let's suppose they fire some missiles that they want to go off maybe 20 miles off the coast of Taiwan. Let's say, Neal, that accidentally one of the guidance systems of those missiles fails and it lands in downtown Taipei or just hits Taiwan by accident. Those are very real possibilities that could trigger a war. I mean, Taiwan responds back. The United States starts moving forces to back Taiwan. China responds. I mean, this is how wars happen. I mean, it doesn't have to be a blatant
I see exactly what you're talking about, Harry. One of the other things I say, we always assume in this country that China looks at the boycotts and the punishments that have been meted out and sanctions against Russia in light of the Ukraine war, and probably figures they're by the grace of God go I, and we don't want anything to do with that. We depend on the rest of the world, trading with the rest of the world to keep us the economic and military power we are. So they don't want to risk, pushing things over the edge with the United States or any other Western power. But we might be wrongly feeling those assurances, huh?
I'd agree. I mean, if you look at the structure of how China has built their military, and I won't go too geeky on you here, but basically what they've done is they've built it up for a very powerful first strike capability. In other words, if they think things are going to the tipping point and they think that military action is probable, they are going to attack in every domain possible. That means cyber strikes. That means utilizing the missiles they've built to destroy our satellites, the carrier killer missiles that they've been building for the last 30 years to destroy our aircraft carriers in a war. Because they realized, it would be a bolt from the blue sort of attack to wipe us out in one big blow to basically deter us so we wouldn't want to move forces, 6,000 to 7,000 miles across the Pacific to attack.
So sort of like the way Japan was thinking when it, attacked Pearl Harbor. We're not going anywhere. This is kind of our moment. We surprise them and strike them. We're on our way. I know it's a little bit of military apples and oranges, but do you think that Chinese leadership is seriously thinking that through, that it would have a chance to defeat the United States?
It would be Pearl Harbor on steroids. And Neal, you're on the right idea here because the Chinese understand that they're at the tip of their military and economic power. Think of it this way. By 2100, the Chinese population, because it's getting older and because it's not replacing its population, will drop from 1.4 billion people to 570 million. That's a drop of 2/3.
Wow.
The U.S. population, because of immigration, and illegal or illegal, we can debate that another time, will actually be a little bit higher. So the Chinese may surpass us for a little while in terms of economic dominance because of demographics, but the United States is right up there behind them. So what I worry about is the Chinese may think that this is their time, and that's scary.
Real quickly, Harry, I love talking to you because you look at the big picture pretty much like Mr. Dalio does. It looks like this was going to start the year to be where we would eclipse the growth of China in terms of the economy. It would be the first time we were going at a faster pace than China, I think, since 1976. Now, with these back-to-back contracting quarters, that doesn't look likely. And the Chinese seem to be in a better economic position than we are. How do you think, forget about how we're digesting that, how they're digesting that?
Well, I think in the short term, they feel the advantage. But I think in the long term, they see those demographic trends. I mean, the one thing, Neal, that has driven the Chinese, economic and military power is having that big population, having lots of children, bringing them out of poverty. And I think for the next 5 or 6 years, you will see the Chinese put a lot of effort into bringing, those hundreds of millions of people out in Western China into the Chinese economic realm, into the cities. But they can't grow their way like that forever. And that's why, as long as the United States doesn't create a massive debt bomb that we can't pay back, which doesn't look very good right now, I think the United States has the advantage in the long term.
I always learn a lot, Harry. Thank you very much. Good seeing you. Have a safe weekend.
You too, Neal. Thanks.
All right, Harry Kazianis.